Hello. Thank you for joining us, Kate. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
If you could just start us off by anyone that isn't familiar with you, what's your
Yeah,
journey with yoga and becoming a teacher and all that
and
good
all
stuff?
that. Yeah, so my name is Kate Lombardo. I always like to say, I have to take a break because people think it's Caitlin Bardo. So it's Kate Lombardo. I have been a yoga teacher for almost 10 years and a practitioner for even longer than that. I actually came to yoga when I was in my early 20s as a student after incurring a health issue. My lung collapsed when I was 22 randomly. And in the healing process of that, both from the physical piece, but then also just emotionally, I think, from the trauma associated with it, I wandered into a yoga class with no idea what I was getting into. And my first experience was that I was a total mess and disaster and could do physically almost nothing because I had no clue about any poses or anything like that. But then at the end of the class, when we got to the point where we were in Shavasana talking about the breath, it was this beautiful thing where it gave me control again over the thing that had kind of sent my life in a spiral. And so from that point forward, just fell in love with this practice. And then as I got deeper and deeper into it as a student, I decided that that was something that I wanted to share with other people. And so I went on to train to become a yoga teacher. I did that as a solopreneur for a while, and then I opened up my own studios with my still business partner in Hoboken, New Jersey. We closed those during the pandemic as a result of being forced to. And then while that happened, we shifted online and are with and have continued to grow YogaRenew, which is our current company, focused on online yoga teacher training. So bringing both initial certifications to people in an online format and then continuing education as well. And we're still doing that and growing that with the most wonderful team, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Our headquarters are based in Hoboken, so we have a studio reopened and reimagined as part of YogaRenew. And then now also focusing on mentoring yoga teachers on growing the business side of yoga. Yeah, kind of the short version in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And there's so many different parts of it. I love that you've had the
Yes.
whole studio experience as well as the
Yeah.
online experience. And
Yeah.
definitely recommend Yoga Renew to anyone. I've done a
Thank
couple of
you.
your courses,
Yes.
prenatal and yin. That's the one,
Again.
then
Yeah.
my two.
It's the one
Yeah,
with me.
big fan. Yeah, I love the
Well,
yin
thank
one.
you. Thank you.
So one of the topics you're really passionate about helping yoga teachers with is working on their relationship with money. In your experience, how does the way a teacher views their money influence their business decisions and the level of their success?
Yeah. I mean, so it's so interesting because I think for me, so in what feels like a previous lifetime, I was a high school English teacher. And when I left that job to pursue teaching yoga, I had one goal, which was just I need to do whatever I can to replace my income in my full-time job. And I did that not just from teaching yoga right away. I had a bunch of different other side jobs to kind of round that out. But then as I got more successful teaching and doing other things, I replaced that income, but I never moved forward beyond that income. And it wasn't until I dived into my own relationship with money and the scarcity issues that surrounded that and the beliefs that I didn't even realize that I held that everything finally started to shift. And so it was the unpacking of all of that money mindset work that then I felt like I was able to achieve more financial freedom and success. And it's interesting because now that I get to train and work with so many different yoga teachers, I think there's a big question for people how do you actually make a living doing this, right? How do you actually teach yoga and support yourself? And it's, to me, a real problem in our industry overall, the fact that there's so many yoga teachers that are so passionate about sharing this, and it's such an important thing to share. And so I think this idea of starting to work on money mindset first and try to figure out how to unpack anything that's maybe holding us back to then be able to use that as a way to say, okay, I've done the work on believing that it's possible and okay for me to make money. Because I also think there's a big stigma around making money as a yoga teacher. And so I think until that gets unpacked, there's a block almost, I think, in terms of then embracing the strategy that goes with really growing a business as a yoga teacher and looking at it that way. So to me, the mindset piece comes before everything, because if that's not in place, you can keep trying strategies, but I don't think you're ever all in unless you hold the belief that it's possible and permissible to actually make money teaching yoga.
Yeah, I think you're very much right on there's this uncomfort about being okay with teaching yoga and accepting an income. How do you help people overcome that resistance and embrace that you can generate income and teach yoga in sort of this nice coexisting harmony?
So I think for me, the biggest thing, I had a lot of guilt around saying that I wanted to make more money. Like just being able to say that out loud and be like, no, I want to earn, 6 figures or more than that, or whatever that looks like. To be able to say that out loud, I didn't feel empowered and felt sometimes embarrassed or guilty. And I think that came for me, and I think for many people, in this held belief that money is the root of all evil, right? Like how many times have we heard that? And I read a book that changed my whole life. It's by Jen Sincero called You're a Badass at Making Money. And one of the things she talks about in there is that money in and of itself is just, it's paper, right? It's nothing. Like money isn't emotional. Money can't do evil things because it's not human. Like humans do evil things with money, but humans also do really, really good things with money, right? Money funds helping childhood hunger and saving and curing diseases and research on all of that kind of stuff. And really it comes down to this idea of it's not the money itself, it's what you then choose to do with that money that defines whether or not it's okay for you to do so. And I think as yoga teachers, we get into this idea of feeling guilty about making money, but it's like you can make money and then still do really, really good things, right? And so it's like if you're financially stable and you don't have to stress all the time about how much you're going to make or how you're going to pay your bills, how much more room then do you have to donate to causes you care about or do charity yoga classes for people who might otherwise not have had access to yoga before? And I think when we start to look at it as a platform and a place that we can then empower us to do even more good in the world, I think that's a big shift for people. And I think that's kind of where I like to start is, do you think that it's bad to make money? Why do you feel guilty about that first? Like getting to the root of that and then seeing if we can flip the script and understand that if more yoga teachers made money, I think there'd be a lot more people doing good with the money that exists.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be like that shift from
Yeah.
just shift on how the society sort of values everything as
Exactly.
well. Yeah. I've often thought that because my background's in
Mm.
animal and plant conservation. And when you study for like 4 years and then you just get these grunt work where you're just basically on the bottom tier in terms of income levels. And then you're just at the bottom of the heap. And I always thought that I'm like, if I can make more money, I can own my own conservation park and I
Exactly.
can buy
and do
all the
all the
land
good things.
and
Yes.
I can like turn them all into conservation parks instead of forestry. Like
Right.
that kind of
Right.
that's my big goal.
Right.
My
I love
secret
that.
plan to rule the world.
Buy up all the land and do good things with it.
Yes.
I
Plant
like that.
trees, but that's a big one.
It's true though,
Make
right?
habitat. Yeah, it's definitely true. For a yoga teacher just starting out that's maybe struggling with this money mindset, is there any practical action that they can take that's going to help fix this and help them to grow their business?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to mindset, right? So there's of course strategy stuff. And I think I want to make it clear that I don't think that you can just meditate your way to being rich. There's that whole like the secret and all that. And it's important. The mindset piece is yes, part of it. And then there's like the strategy piece of it too. But in terms of just the mindset when you're starting out, to be honest, it becomes sort of like a fake it till you make it thing. I think there's asking yourself why, right? Understanding like what is your relationship with money? Where are the scarcity issues? Where do you hold beliefs that make you feel guilty about not making more? Unpacking those, but they don't change overnight. And I think a big piece of it just starts to become pretending in a way, acting as if you do believe it, and then taking action from that place. And at first, it feels a little weird, right? To walk around and just start saying to people like, yeah, no, I plan to make a lot of money. Or I used to put like money mantras on my phone as a wallpaper, like money comes to me easily. I deserve to be wealthy, all of that stuff. And I'm like, I don't really believe this all the way, but then the more you say it, you have to retrain your brain and those thought processes and the pathways that they take until that starts to become your new story and your new truth. And it's like anything, right? You don't learn a new language overnight. It takes repetition and practice. And it's the same thing when it comes to money mindset. And so I think some of those actionable things are developing some type of money mantra that you say to yourself over and over and over again, each morning, each night, something that feels in your body like you can eventually believe it and that you feel empowered by, that calls in more abundance and wealth. Then surrounding yourselves with books and podcasts and things where people are talking about this in a positive way. Like I said, that for me, the number one that I felt was like the most relatable and funny and lighthearted was You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. And I think there's so many good tips in that book that are a good place to get started. Yeah, I mean, and those are, I think, the two really big things is just starting to little by little chip away at understanding the root of where it comes from and then flipping the script on how to change all of that.
There's often this idea of like making it a number that you believe is possible, which is maybe placing your income that you currently have, or making it like this sort of grander, like reach for the stars kind of number. What do you think we should start with that?
I think it needs to feel like it pushes you out of your comfort zone, but it does also need to feel realistic, right? Like for me, when I had replaced my income, like, and I knew that I could do that. That felt like possible and I did it quickly, but I was still stuck in that scarcity mindset. It was not realistic for me to be like, and now I'm going to make $150 million. Like, I think that starts to be too crazy. It needs to feel possible. And like, what are you going to do with that money? I think the big piece is attaching some type of value. Like a number means nothing to people. It just feels like, okay, that would be nice if I had $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, but what do you actually want to do? And what would that get you? Like, I know for me, when I was looking to call in more money, I wanted a bigger apartment. I, at the time, had one kid, but I have two now. And I was like, I want to be able to have my children have their own room. And in order to do that, my rent is going to go up. So what's the number that I need to call in order to make that possible? And I was able to attach something that I really wanted. And I could feel myself like in that bigger apartment where I'd have more space for my family and we would not feel like we were on top of each other and cluttered, and emotionally connect to the things that I wanted to do with that money rather than just a number. And I feel like then kind of backing it out from there. And then when I was able to achieve that, it became like, okay, so that happened. And now we're in this other apartment. Like, what's the next phase of something? What's something else I could add to my life, or something that I want to do, or who do I want to help? And to me, it becomes attaching to the things you feel connected to emotionally, and what is the number that you need in order to be able to achieve those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sort of strengthens that rather than just being like, I just want all the money. Then it's like,
because again, it just feels so arbitrary then. And then it feels like it's coming from a place of like attachment and greediness as opposed to emotional connection and like there's good in it, right? And I think that that's a really huge difference between the mindset that we take in terms of how the energy and the vibration we're putting out to call that in.
And then I guess you're also not trying to draw in more than you need because you know how much you need to fulfill this emotional or
totally
practical, whatever it might be.
Well, and I think you just brought up something really important because it's also that idea of like defining what your enough is. And that's different for everybody. It's determined by the area of the world that you live in. It's determined by, do you have children or do you not? Do you have a partner or do you have not? Like there's so many variables. And I think we live in this space where people like to throw around flashy numbers as a way to use as like a sales or a marketing tool when, for one person, making 5 figures might be perfect and that's enough. For another person, they might need multiple 6 figures to support their family. And it doesn't mean either is right or wrong. It's just what is your enough so that you don't get caught in this rat race of just like go, 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 go all the time. And there's a balance between the achievement and the calling in of wealth and money, and also then being able to enjoy that and build the life that you actually want to live.
Yeah, I think that's an important point because enough as like, I've got this amount of money now, I can cut my hours and then build your worth that
Totally.
way, rather than being like, okay, I just have to keep making more and more and more because now I'm
Exactly.
working this much. Which brings us around to knowing your worth.
Yeah.
That often gets thrown around a lot. How do you guide teachers to assess like their worth just beyond that hourly rate or that class price? There's sort of deeper practical tools that you can help for them to recognize their value.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, this is like a two-step thing. And I think comes down to that idea of knowing your numbers. What is it that you have to make? And what is it that is maybe the reach goal that you want to make, right? And being really clear about that. And then saying, what am I doing? What am I laying out? What is my plan to get there? What do I need to price my offerings at in order to make that happen? And what is my time worth? And I think it's also taking into account not just the hours that you're showing up to teach the workshop or lead the retreat or create the classes, but all the prep time and all the follow-up time that comes after that, and looping that in and understanding that we don't work in a space where it's a typical clock in, clock out, 9 to 5 and everything ends, right? There's a lot of preparation that goes into the things that we're preparing, and that you need to be compensated for that time. And so when people are investing in taking a workshop with you or something like that, they're investing not just in that hour or 2 hours or 3 hours they spend with you, but in all of the work that it took for you to create that offering. So I think it's taking into account your time, taking in that number that you want to make, working backwards to figure out what that needs to be as a step one. And then it's also a step two of like, what feels okay to you to say to people. I work with my own business coach and have different coaches that I've worked with throughout the years, but the one I currently work with, which in terms of pricing offers, I loved her approach to it because, you can do industry research and say like, what do my competitors charge and all of that? And that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to look someone in the eye and say, if you say like, it's $3,000 to work with me one-on-one for the month. If you say that and like you get a pit in your stomach and it feels like gross and icky to you, then like that's not a good, then don't charge that. Like even if your competitors are, that doesn't mean that it's bad if you only want to charge $1,500. Like if that feels better to you in your body and you have the space energetically, maybe you take on two where other people are taking on one. I think if you operate from a place of like the gut check of, can I say this to someone and stand in that power and truth and go, no, this is yes, what I'm worth. And I feel like it's a fair price where I'm not trying to like trick somebody into spending money with me. Then I say like, charge what you feel comfortable charging. And she always tells me like, do a mirror check, like literally look at yourself in the mirror and practice saying what the offer is. And if it feels okay now, and there's a difference between it feeling scary, right? Like it's scary to tell somebody to give you money at times, especially in the earlier stages of working with something. It's different. Like feeling icky about it is different than being a little nervous about it. I think it's like, do you feel like, ugh, this is gross and I'm like tricking people into paying me for something? Or is it like, this is scary, but I know that this is what I'm worth. And it's, I think, literally practicing that and then setting your price based on how you feel about it. And you can always change it. That's the other thing I think people forget. Like you can create a workshop, you can teach it once, and if the next time around you feel like you need to charge a little more, you can. And you're not stuck forever with one thing. It can be fluid and ever changing.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up, does it feel icky or does it feel uncomfortable? Because those are two very different things, which are maybe a bit tricky to like heal at times, especially if you're getting used to it. I'm no expert on money. I've got a lot of
Yeah.
work to do.
I mean, and I'm still working through it, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm now working on helping other people with it because I've made a lot of progress, but still I think, and anytime you try to reach for a new goal or whatever that looks like, it's scary sometimes. And that discomfort's okay, but feeling like you're suddenly feeling like you're not a good person, like that's not okay.
Yeah. And it'll come through when you're actually giving the offer as well. Because if you feel like this is actually icky and it's not fair, you're not going to be as confident. Whereas if you're like, I'm just a bit
100%.
uncomfortable, but this is definitely what it's worth, and I know it's
Yeah.
really worth this value, then
Yeah.
you're probably going to be more successful in the long run anyway, because people will pick
Totally.
up on that.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with that.
How do we come into a place of abundance when we're like, oh, there's so many competitors, how am I ever going to compete? I think maybe not as much depending on the size of your city if you're working in person, but more online, because online, everyone's online and it's just such a broad sort of market.
So I love that you brought this up, because so Patrick, who's my business partner, and I, one of the things both in our studios with YogaRenew and then even in the coaching stuff that we're moving into as well, it's a little bit, we get pushback sometimes from people when we first say it, but this is what I'll share, is that I think there's a lot of yoga teachers that try to say, like, I teach all styles and I can help anyone. And I teach a little bit of Ashtanga and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's like accessible for everybody. And if that works for you, that's great. But I think what happens is, like you said, then it sort of waters down the message and it becomes that we're all just offering the same thing, and it's okay if someone takes your class and doesn't like it. That's a good thing, right? You're not going to be for everyone. And I think what we encourage people to do is to say, like, pick the one thing that you love teaching and become really, really good at it. Like, go all in on one style and become an expert in it, so that not only can you lead students, but eventually you can lead workshops and eventually you can lead trainings, and you become known for that one thing, and that differentiates you from other teachers. It doesn't mean that you can't study all of the other things that you're interested in. But I think as yoga teachers, we can be yoga students, lifelong students, and learn about all different styles and learn about whatever piques our interest. And we can still focus on teaching the thing that we're really great at teaching. And then once you become that expert in the one thing, maybe then you add a second from there, or maybe a third from there, depending on how long you do this. But I think that that's how you can start to establish yourself as unique in a space where there are a lot of people doing something, because eventually people start to develop interests in certain lanes, right? Like, there are people who start out, they're like, I've never come to yoga before, and they go and they try a vinyasa class and they try a hatha class and they try a yin class, and then they're like, I'm a runner, like, I really love yin yoga. Eventually they're going to go to the yin yoga expert if they want to learn more and dive deeper about yin yoga. And let's say that person becomes a yoga teacher, they're going to train from the person who really knows what they're talking about when it comes to yin, versus the teacher who just like kind of dabbles a lot in everything. And I think if you're trying to establish yourself doing this as a full-time career, it has to move beyond just group classes. There needs to be retreats or workshops or trainings or courses or whatever that is. And you want to start to develop an area of expertise in that. So I think that that's a big piece, is like knowing what you love, what you're truly passionate about, and then going all in on developing your knowledge about that, and then also the unique way that you have at presenting it and sharing it with people, because every voice is different, every person is different, and people are attracted to yoga teachers, yes, for their knowledge, but then also just for who they are as people, right? Like, I teach mostly the two that I would say that I'm an expert in would be vinyasa yoga sequencing. That's like really what I doubled down on. I went on as a teacher to then also study yin yoga pretty extensively. So from a teaching piece, those are the two. And then now the business side is, I think, where I would be on the third. But back when I was teaching vinyasa, like, my classes were great with vinyasa sequencing. Patrick and I built our studios around all of the teachers sequencing in that same style and method. And we did that even on a bigger level for the studio. Like, this was the way that these were taught. But then I would have people be like, oh, I come because I really liked it in your Dharma talk. Like, you talk about positive psychology, which I hold a certificate in. And so sure, they liked my sequence in my class and that needed to be good. But ultimately, they also just liked that I talked about happiness. And that was more about me as a person, even though the sequence of the teacher right before me may have been similar because we were teaching in the same style. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah, I say, like, double down on being an expert in something and then show up as you fully and embody that.
I love that. And I like that you mentioned the Dharma talks as well, because I've seen a lot on Instagram and people are like, no, people don't like the philosophy of it. And you're like, well, you're not teaching yoga then. So it's not actually a yoga class anymore. And people don't know that they maybe don't know.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because there's a way to do it, maybe someone's very first time in a yoga class, they're not ready to like dive into a story from the Bhagavad Gita, but like you might be able to take a theme from that and then tell a modernized version that's relatable to someone's life. And they're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like, there are ways to make it accessible for people, but I think it's important to present more than just the physical part. Yeah.
When we're balancing this idea of abundance and
Mhm.
success, talking about the more spiritual side of things, how can we navigate this? Because it does kind of feel opposed to ideas of non-attachment, aparigraha.
So this is where I also think I probably come at this from like a little bit of a unique angle, but I have been broke, like really, really broke. Like when my lung collapsed, I lived in the US at the time. This was like, I'm dating myself here, but pre-Barack Obama. So before we had health insurance extended to people till they were like 26, 27. So I had no health insurance at the time. I literally had negative money in my bank account. And then my doctor sued me at the time in my early 20s, right as my student loans kicked in. And it was not a great time. Like I've been really, really broke. I can tell you, then on the other side of it, I have been comfortable, right? Where I'm not really broke anymore. And I can promise that I was way more attached and more obsessed with money when I was really broke than now, right? Because when you don't have and you're in that place of scarcity and you're desperate to pay your bills and you're wondering exactly like, how am I going to afford the groceries to come next? All of the attachment then becomes like, how do I make ends meet? And the obsession with money and the attachment to like, I need more of this, I need more of this. You can't move from a place of stability. And so as a result, there's a big attachment to needing more. When you get out of that and you give yourself a baseline of comfort and financial freedom, it frees you up to not get so attached anymore to the financial pieces. I have more space now to enjoy time with my kids where it's okay to just take a day off and go and play in the park. And I'm not like stressed and wondering should I be doing more and creating more and making more and earning more? Because at my baseline, I'm good. And I think that comes down to the whole idea of like defining your enough. And I'm not saying like every yoga teacher needs to become the next Jeff Bezos. Like that's not remotely, I think, when I talk about calling in more money, you don't have to necessarily say like, I'm going to be a millionaire yoga teacher if that's not what you're looking for. But I think there's a really big difference between adopting a healthy money mindset, being willing to say, I want to make good money as a yoga teacher, or struggling to get by. And I think the idea of molding it with the spiritual practices and this idea of non-attachment comes from knowing that when you hit your enough, it's also okay to stop, to say like, even if my neighbor, I don't know, bought 2 new cars this year, like I don't need a new car. I'm good. Like I have everything I need. I've earned my enough, but I don't feel afraid that it's going to go away tomorrow. So I don't have to be obsessed with trying to take and earn more. And so I think this idea of earning more money, it comes from a place of doing so that you can free yourself up to focus on all of those other things and not be stuck in this hamster wheel of how do I share yoga? How do I do what I love? But oh my gosh, like I need to make more. I need to have a side job, or maybe I'll go back to my 9 to 5 because how am I going to afford XYZ? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, because you do get really obsessed with money when you don't have enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have to accept that we live in a certain society that
Absolutely.
requires it for us to feed ourselves and things like that.
To meet our like basic survival needs, like, you know, whether we like it or not. I mean, human nature, right? At our core, we're always going to try to preserve our need to survive, and we need to be able to have food and housing and all of those things. And in the world we live in, the thing that gives you that is money. And so I think it's just making sure that you feel okay being able to achieve those things, and then it can release some of the attachment from it.
How do we translate that into practical actions and steps in our business once we've kind of opened our minds,
Overcome the mindset
overcome
piece?
some of this mindset?
Yeah. So I think that comes to this idea, right? Like you can't just meditate your way to wealth. There needs to become strategy, and then not just strategy, but action on that strategy. So what are the things to put in place and to really get organized and focused to try to grow a business? And if that means that you're a solopreneur teacher where you're planning to teach at different studios or things like that, like I always encourage people, if you're not interested in opening your own studio, or you don't necessarily want to have an online business and you're going what I would call now sort of like the more traditional route of teaching yoga, right? Not necessarily like developing an online course, but I think it becomes like making sure to develop something that is yours, that's not just getting the hourly group rate from a group yoga class? So is it a workshop that you can lead and bring to studios where there can be a higher split between you and the studio? Is there a training that you can create? Is there a retreat that you can host each year where you can have some of these higher ticket items? And what does that look like for you? And what needs to happen in order to fill them, right? So starting to lay out a business plan of, here's the lower stuff where I build my audience, the group classes that I teach, the exposure for just being able to get students. Then how do I get them to invest in me directly instead of going through a studio or through a gym where then I get that paycheck, in paying me for a workshop or paying to come on a retreat with me where I can earn more money for those students, and really laying out like that sales cycle for yourself and starting to establish what that looks like. And really it is the same thing when it comes to then if you own a studio or you own or are looking to do an online business. It's that idea of like, what are the actual offers that I'm going to do? And how do I go from the broad audience where something is more lower price to a smaller condensed audience where something can be a bit more higher priced? And then how do you just continue to broaden that audience? And I mean, for me, the number one thing that I think all yoga teachers should do immediately right away, even if you're not ready to sell something, is to start building an email list right from the get-go of a way to be able to connect to your students and let them know then what you're doing, right? Because even if it's just that you don't want to do this full time, you want to teach part-time at a couple of different studios, but then you decide to teach a workshop, it's like not ethical to go to one studio and say like, hey, everybody, in a week, I'm teaching a workshop down the street and you should all come. You're not going to announce that in a class. But if you have gotten those students on an email list that you send out emails to and you connect to regularly, that's a place where then it is ethical for you to say to all of the people who signed up on your email list, this is when I'm teaching a workshop at this studio, you should come. And so strategically, that's like the number one first step that I would always recommend someone takes.
That's good advice. And then that splits for both the online side and also in person as well. So if you want to branch
it gives you
into
that
more
flexibility.
The online world, you have that flexibility.
Yeah.
How can people approach marketing and feel really aligned with their values? Because you might be uncomfortable with asking for the email address or uncomfortable emailing. And how can we make sure everything
that shift happens? Yeah. Okay. So for me, the shift became when I stopped thinking of marketing as like a business sales tool and started thinking of it a way to connect with students beyond just them taking my yoga class. And so if you're talking about it via social media, if you look at that through social media marketing or email marketing, any of those kind of marketing things, it's how do I continue to provide value for people off their mat in those platforms? So like for myself, we just started a whole new sector of our email list, the Yoga CEO Insiders Club, helping teachers develop more on this business side and grow it. We're emailing people twice a week, not with sales emails, but with stories and tips and inspiration for yoga teachers on like, here's my story. I started out, how did I transition full time? These are the top 3 things I did. You could do them too. And continuing to actually give value and serve and inspire and connect rather than just be like, let me send another promo to promote myself, and making it more about them, right? If you're a yoga teacher, you do it to try to help people better themselves. And so how can you do that? Through marketing platforms. How can you use social media as a tool to inspire people and connect with them even further? Answer your DMs, answer your emails. Like I'll respond to emails from my YogaRenew email address where, we're so fortunate to have thousands of students, and students will email me and I respond back and they're like, I can't believe you responded. I'm like a real person who wants to actually teach you. And I think we live in this world where people are quick to forget that people are people in a digital world. Like if someone DMs you on social media, there's an actual human on the other side who took time to want to connect with you or answer a question. And so I think it's starting to look at marketing as a tool for connection. And I think that makes it feel aligned with who you are as a teacher. If you're showing up to serve even in your marketing, yes, it might benefit a business, but it's also, you're not selling them a used car, right? You're selling this practice that you know is going to help and transform their lives. And so it's easy to sell when you know it's going to actually help someone.
Yeah, and just bring the person back into it. You don't have to put on this fake salesman outfit like actor.
Right.
There's so many different marketing angles we can go in. And I think we both agree getting an email list is your sort of goal. and once you've gone down there. But how do we funnel people into these? So you've got offering it if you've got classes, social media. Is there any particular way to actually get people in the door that you found works particularly for yoga teachers?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, I think, is just like literally telling people about it, whether that's on social media or in person. So I think if you have an email, let's say we're taking the idea of like just growing an email list, I think you need to send people emails if you're going to have it, right? And offer something of value. But if it's in your classes and it's something as simple as like, hey, just so everybody knows, like I like to send out weekly my favorite recipes and, a pose of the week. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can, now we're in the day where you can like create a landing page and scan a QR code on Canva. Like there's digital ways to make it faster, but it can be as simple as like a clipboard with names, and you can go the old manual route and enter them into a spreadsheet. If you're not yet like really into the depths of email marketing and funnels and all that kind of stuff, it can be really straightforward and simple. And same thing on social media. I think as I've continued to be back in the early stages of like building a new list and a new segment of things, there's a good amount of success from just showing up and being like, hey, I started this thing. If you want to learn more, send me a message and I'll add you to the list. And like people will do that. Now you can get into, there's a lot of strategy into it that comes with like creating freebies and lead magnets and all that type of stuff in the online world, which I can speak to and is hugely valuable. But at a baseline, if you're just starting out, like just asking people, say, hey, I'm going to send out, a recap of my Dharma talk that will inspire you every week. If you want it, just give me your email and I'm happy to send it to you. And people want that. They want to hear from their teacher and the people that inspire them in a yoga class. If they're at work and that's the first thing that they open on a Monday morning, how much better is that than an email from someone's boss right away, right? And so I think we putting ourselves out there and just asking is half the battle.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's important to remember the numbers on that side as well. Like email them even though you've got 2 people on your email list, because they are 2 people that are on your email list that are hoping to hear from you. I had one friend and she was like, oh, there's only like a couple people on there. I'm not going to bother. It's too much work. And you're like, but that's 5 whole people that
right. Well, and I like to think of it like tying it back to an actual yoga class. Like I've had people like, well, I only have, 30 people on an email list. I'm like, if you showed up and taught a yoga class to 30 people, you'd probably feel pretty good. Like that's a good size yoga class. Like that's 30 humans that are asking you, like in their inbox that you're going to actually, especially when it comes to an email list, because, when it comes to social media followers, which I still think I only have like 300 followers. I'm like, 300 followers is 300 people. Like put those people in a room. That's a lot of people, But of course, in an algorithm world, not everyone sees your content. I understand that. But on an email list, like theoretically, they're actually going to everybody's inbox. So a quote unquote small number in this digital world, if you really break it down, like isn't actually that small. And everybody has to start somewhere, right? Every single person's email list at one point, they started with 0 people. And then it just takes time.
Yeah, and keep putting it out there. And then also don't be afraid to tell people about your offers, because I know people can get really caught up in the offering inspiration part rather than the asking for the sale. And you just never do that part.
Right. I think even if it's like 75% of the time or 80% of the time you're inspiring people, it like 20%, you want to invite them. And that was another thing that I think was a big shift for me with a coach that I've worked with, is like, stop thinking of sales as something scary and start thinking of it as an invitation, right? If you have created something that you know is going to make someone's life better, how can you invite them to be part of it? And there's an exchange of energy that needs to happen. They have to pay for it because you're giving up your time, your expertise, your knowledge. Just like if you buy a shirt, right? Someone had to make that and you give money in order to get that. It's the same kind of thing in a service-based industry, but you're not selling a used car. You're selling something that can help them, and no one's forcing them to give you money for that. So it's an invitation. I'd love for you to be part of this. And if they want to be, they will be.
Yeah, I like that you said no one's forcing you, because there does seem to be this sort of like messaging sometimes that you're like stealing their money and they're forcing to take their credit card if you have like a funnel or something and you've offered it and you're like, it's up to them. Like,
Yeah.
you're not
Like, you're
on the
not
other
exactly.
end, like manipulating
And I
them
say
to
that as someone
swipe
like
their
I'm the
card.
queen. I'm the queen of buying online courses. And some of them
Yeah.
I've taken and I'm like, this changed my life and was so valuable. Some of them I buy and I literally never look at them. I'm not like mad at the course creator for that. Like that's me buying something and then just not using it. Like that's on the user. And here, listen, people here and there, like maybe they ask for a refund and you always have to navigate that, but that's about them and not you. And there's so many more people that are going to be there and be kind and going to learn from you. You have to learn to let some of that roll off your back.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm also the queen of buying things. I've spent way too much money on things that I
Yep.
have not utilized, and it's
Oh,
not on them.
especially with like now Apple Pay, you can pay for everything. I'm like, yes, I'll swipe up and Apple Pay you this $50 for this template that I need or whatever it looks like.
That'll sit in my
Yeah, that'll
Canva
sit
account,
exactly. Yep,
maybe
and
get
I'll
used
never
one
use.
time. Yeah, but it sounds like a great
Yeah,
deal. But if you used it, you'd probably get exactly what they were
exactly.
telling you
It's
that you would get.
exactly.
Yeah. I
It's
think
true.
that lies the difference as well. Like, are you selling something that at the end of the day is going to do what you've said it's going to do, or are
100%.
you not? And then if
Yes.
you're selling something that you know you've said it's going to do, then you can take the bit out of it. It's up to them.
Yeah, like if you
They use
do
it.
sell like a, crappy used car, like that's not nice, right? But like if that's not what you're doing, then it's okay. Like you can sell something that's really going to help people if you believe in it.
Yeah, and then it's on them if they use it or not.
Totally.
Okay, so I would to ask you, looking forward, future trends, what do you think people need to keep an eye out? How do you see this industry changing in the next decade?
So I do think the molding of the online space, I mean, listen, AI stuff is crazy. Like who knows what the world's going to look like in 10 years, right? And I think yoga is going to evolve in terms of it being online. We're going to see more and more of that. But I also would say trend wise, my experience in seeing, I can tell you that as someone now who owns an online business and has an in-person studio and came from the in-person studio world, during COVID, I remember thinking like, that's it. Studios are done. Like no one's like, it's so much easier. We can practice at home and all of these things. And it certainly is not the same as it was before, at least like in our New York City area. Like we used to have people, it was 6:30 p.m., 5 days a week, they were there on their mat. And now maybe it's twice a week and it might be at like 12:30. And so the habits have changed, but I do think that as human beings we seek connection and in-person connection. There is something to be said for just being in a room with other people. Like I know as a teacher, having a room of 20, 30 people and oming all together is just doesn't feel the same as it does if you're teaching online. Now, connecting in an online world, I've been able to meet. I mean, that's how, right? We're connecting, doing this like literally across the world from each other. I mean, how special is that too? And the two can coexist. But I think as teachers, the adaptability of being able to exist in both places, I think is going to be really important. And to know that, yes, teach online, yes, learn how to create courses and all of that, but don't toss away the idea of being with people in person, whether that is bringing people together for a retreat or continuing to teach in person once a week just to be able to fill your own juices energetically, I think is going to still be really important in the future. I think yoga is that piece that people come to seek that like true connection within themselves. And there's something really tangible about doing that in an in-person experience too. And so I think in this world of AI and online, I do think that that's going to happen. I think that's going to influence the yoga industry for sure. And I still think people are going to want to connect in person too.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. There's something deeper about that in-person connection, and even bringing the in-person online in terms of just selling digital products that have no connection, like having that live piece in some way, shape, or form.
Yep, I agree.
Cool, thank you. It's rapid fire question time.
Oh
so
boy.
if you could turn to yourself in the first year of becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur, what advice would you give?
Know that failure isn't failure unless you stop, I think. I think that there were things that I tried that didn't work out in the early years and I would feel like I failed. I'm proud of myself because I did keep going, but like it felt worse then. Like now if something doesn't work, I'm like, that's fine. Like I've done this. I've put so many things out there that haven't worked that it's like, okay, well, cut that loss and like move on and just keep going. And I've learned now that really in entrepreneurship, like the only way you fail is if you stop. It's a constant game of pivoting. And once you think you have it figured out, something changes. Or as entrepreneurs, like we're not wired to like just do the same thing forever. Like I'm like, oh, this is what I'm doing forever. And then I'm like 6 months into the same thing. I'm like, no, I got to do something else, because it's like you need those creative juices and then you try something new. And I think if I could go back to myself, it would be like, it's okay if it feels like it didn't work, because I was hard on myself in those early years when something didn't work right away. And I think I'd just be a little more gentle, advise myself to be more gentle about the things that didn't work immediately.
That's good advice. I saw a quote recently, can't remember the whole thing, but it was like entrepreneurs get comfortable with failing fast.
Yeah,
that was it. And
totally. I love that. That's
idea.
it's exactly true. It's like, let it go, move on, don't get attached to it, and just do the next thing.
Yeah, and one of them will land the way you really wanted it to.
Exactly.
If you smash them out.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. How can people connect with you if they're wanting to learn more? You mentioned you have your new Insider CEO offering as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at kate.lombardo. It's probably the easiest way to connect with me personally. And I have the info there for joining our Yoga CEO Insiders Club, where we send out that's an email newsletter, just free tips and things like that to keep yoga teachers inspired on the business side of things. And then from a yoga teaching perspective, at YogaRenew on Instagram, or yogarenew.com is where my trainings, courses are, and kind of all the teaching methodology piece is there. So I think those two places are really the easiest way to stay connected with me.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll put all of the links for everyone in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Kate. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and sharing all your wisdom with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for all you're doing to lift up yoga teachers. It's so important. I feel like the more of us that do that, the better we are as a community and group. So thank you as always.